So no Masonic undertaking should ever be handled without the invocation of deity. So please assume a posture of devotion. Most holy and glorious Lord God, the great architect of the universe, the giver of all good gifts and graces, in thy name we have assembled, and in thy name we desire to proceed in all our doings. Grant that the sublime principles of Freemasonry may so subdue every discordant passion within us, so enrich our hearts with thine own love and goodness, that the lodge or group at this time may humbly reflect that order and beauty which reign forever before thy throne. So abbreviated version, amen. All right, thanks, and I'll get started here with recording. Brother Scott. So welcome everybody to the Joint Masonic Education Series.
Can you hear me?
Thank you very much for joining us. Yep. Tonight we are joined by worshipful Brother Scott Dueball. I've been a very fortunate person to have met Scott a while back and conversed with him several times. Always impressive. Scott and I share a biochemistry, biomechanics, respectively, background, and have a lot of fun when we do get a chance to talk about this. We've been talking about other things tonight, but Brother Scott has received his craft degrees from Muncie Lodge number 433 while a student at Ball State. Since returning to Illinois, Scott's become active in Freemasonry as a master of DC Crazier Lodge number 81 twice, district education officer, the first state education officer, and chairman of the Committee on Masonic Education, all prior to chartering a lodge with Brothers of Spes Novum number 1183. Scott is a member of the Valleys of Chicago and St. Louis, Palatine Yorkright, E.M. Lambert Council number 319 of AMD, and recently became president of the Midwest Conference on Masonic Education. I'm very sorry my condolences for that, the last one there, Brother Scott. You're going to have your hands full, but I am looking forward to what you guys put out there. Tonight, we're going to take a look at identifying ways in which Freemasonry can provide value where gaps exist in fraternal and community life, how companies repackage existing products, and what we're going to do to look at that same concept. Brother Scott, I'll let you take it away.
All right, can you hear me all? I'm going to go ahead and set up a screen share here. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep. There we go. That's perfect.
We're good? Okay. Yeah, so in the green room, we chatted briefly the reference to the current membership boom certainly is a little unjust because I don't know that we're seeing that necessarily. But I think, you know, as you look at, we're going to see a lot more of a dive. I won't get into that. That's another presentation. We're going to see a lot of a dive, but I think hidden inside of that dive, we will see some growth. So I think if we kind of strip that out, we would actually see some strong growth, and really what my recommendation, what my position has been, is let's double down on that growth now, and make sure that those members are getting what they need. Certainly, A Radical in the East by Brent Morris points to some of the ways in which we shorted members in previous generations, and primarily the membership that is the largest balloon portion of our membership numbers now. So would recommend you check out that book. Happy to kind of follow up if you didn't get that one down, but it's Radical in the East. My name's Scott Dueball. I'm the State Education Officer, Chairman of the Committee on Masonic Education for the Grand Lodge of Illinois. But I should say, of course, that the thoughts in here, this is all my own creation. This isn't any official position of any of the Grand Lodges or bodies to which I belong. These are my own thoughts and opinions. And when I originally created this talk, that's what was asked of me. I will also add that I've stayed pretty narrow focused on the claims and the discussion that we're going to go through. There are a lot of tangents that we can go into, but to be quite honest, I wanted to stay focused because there's a lot of stuff here, and we're gonna just burn right through it here. So quick overview, really what I hope that you're able to answer when we kind of walk away from this, and hopefully we get through everything in the time we have, but I want you to be able to answer, what does Masonry look like through the glasses of a child of the 90s? Really the original request on this presentation was to talk about the Masonic experience for millennials. So that's the first bullet. What does Masonry provide that the profane world is either not currently or cannot? And what does this then mean for us or for each of you? So just a quick, I'm going to run through a number of characteristics. You know, if you Google stuff about millennials, certainly I'm not a huge fan of all of the all the ways that we get into details about the characteristics or what a millennial represents. But I will highlight a few. The first is that we're looking for authenticity, and so this is a reminder that you know, as Masons, the millennials joining are looking for you to be what you say, and also don't be what you say you're not. So those are kind of the same thing, but a little bit different. And how that manifests in Masonry, of course, is we understand what the meaning of Masonry is. And I think when millennials come to lodges, a lot of times they get in and they find that a lot of people there don't have a clue of what's going on. And the other thing that we run into is we find some immorality within the lodges. And if we're a group standing there saying that we are a moral institution, then allowing immoral men or immoral Masons to hang around is simply unacceptable. And yeah, I'm not going to go into any more details than that. But just to note, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, we can look this stuff up online. So that's how we know what Masonry is all about. Millennials are civic oriented, entrepreneurial. So lodges can leverage this by talking about ways in which your lodge builds and strengthens the communities, and talk about also building and strengthening the individual Mason and what they're going to get out of the strengthening of their values. We are pragmatic idealists, and we're willing to work hard, which of course is really, really frustrating because I think there was at one point this sentiment that millennials are lazy. And I think if you're trying to get people to join your lodge, you need to be real careful about that kind of info. The last one I would say is transparency. In Illinois, at least, we want to know, we're able to look up the rules. It's pretty easy. And our book of constitutions is on PDF, so we can Google stuff. If this is the case in your jurisdiction, yeah, start being really careful about that, because I've spent a lot of time in meetings where people start saying, well, this is why this is like this. There's rules against that. And we would search it real quick and go, no, that's not a rule. So let's, if there's a good reason, let's use rhetoric and the rest of the trivium. But if there's not, then let's move on. So what else does this mean? As joiners, as those who are potential petitioners, technology can, should, and will be used. We're going to go online. You really should expect your members to go online and learn everything they can about the organization before they show up. That's just the world that we grew up in. And just as some examples, the foundation of our ritual in the United States, these are screen caps that are pulled right off the internet from the Wayback Machine. You can get the Preston Illustrations of Masonry and Webb's Freemasons Monitor. You can get all sorts of other stuff. That's not really the point of this, but other than to say the stuff that created our rituals out there for everyone to check out. But also know that, there's negative stuff where there's confusing, distracting things about what we're about. And that I bring that point up to say, you need to be prepared. You need to know that guys are going to find these things. And you also probably have a responsibility to put together a really good website so that our search engine optimization is improved and doesn't go to this kind of stuff. This is only the first of two movie references I think we're going to make tonight. One of the tools that we use in the marketing world or in my product marketing world is or is not chart. And so what I just want to really point out is for the millennial, the Masonic product is experiencing an initiation. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that initiation has evolved. And it is not simply the modes of recognition. That those secrets are not what the millennials are looking for. They're not what the new joining group, millennial or not, that's not what they're joining for, because they can find those things. It is an access to a pool of strong moral mentors, and is not just handing a book within a catechism to learn. So hopefully what I've introduced here is the idea of initiation and mentorship. And if you just give me a second, I'm going to get caught up on my notes and make sure that that I don't miss anything. So here's my my second reference to a movie. This is from the movie 300. It's showing the Spartan practice of Kripsha. I apologize. It actually has been some time since I've given this presentation, so if I'm getting these details mixed up, I apologize in advance. But this is one example, one of the earliest examples of a rite of initiation. I'm going to go into a detailed definition of initiation here in probably just the next slide. But we no longer really see things like this. We no longer have these rites. We've kind of stripped a lot of initiatory practices out of kind of the growing up experience or the maturation experience. And in accordance with my definition later, initiation being that marking of a point in time when you have been given some knowledge or enlightenment, expanded consciousness, those sort of practices we just don't really have. There are some, I have given this presentation in the past and had some objection that there are some of those that exist within scouting as well as military, but I think the broader public doesn't have an initiatory experience. And then the second part, again, being mentoring. This is an image of Telemachus and mentor, and this kind of stemmed out of Homeric literature and has kind of grown in a post-Homeric experience. So the initiatic experience, Alice Bailey has a wonderful book on initiation, human, solar. And one of the things that she goes into is, or one of the definitions that she gives on initiation is the process of undergoing an expansion of consciousness. She does state that it's the marking of a point in time where we have expanded this consciousness, or we've been given access to a knowledge. And as that definition is given, this experience should be transformative on a spiritual, mental, and physiological levels. Now, you are welcome to disagree with this. I wholly accept that. I'm only offering a perspective, again, from the millennial, the person who has done the research and thinks he's showing up and petitioning a lodge for the sake of really developing his values. So in this sense, we really are looking at a difference between an old self and a new self. And I've told a lot of people that I interact with, that I mentor, that I'm teaching in any way Masonically, that really you should be able to look back, as your current being, and look back at the person who you were maybe just before your initiation, or maybe a period before that. But it should be a different person. And if you don't see a markedly different person, then you've not really experienced an initiation per the definition of initiation. It should be a changing experience. And just a note that we won't get into too much detail on, but we know that many cultures throughout history have used the death and rebirth of a candidate as the basis of this initiation ritual to really show being reborn into a new self. I referenced Alice Bailey here, Initiation, Human and Solar. I'll also reference Brother Robert Hurd's book, which I've bought for new candidates for many years. I think it's a really great introduction into what initiation looks like in different cultures. And so I mentioned that this needs to be both a mental and physical experience. To do that, it needs to be taken seriously. Every single time, every single portion. And don't misunderstand that. I'm not talking about militarized memorization. What I'm talking about is do your best, be serious, put the best program, the best ritual on for your candidate that you can. This is what guys are coming to look for. And part of the elements that I would say go into this in addition to the ritual is good meal, good dress, good behavior, good afterglow. And I would say those 4 parts are really important for a cohesive experience. You are welcome to define what a good meal is, what a good dress is. We were talking about, I joined in Indiana, and I'll tell you, I still love a good ham and bean meal. And you can make that a really, really good meal. I'm not talking about anything fancy necessarily. Certainly in my own personal Masonry, I really like to elevate this as much as possible to make sure the candidate knows that they are really valued and what they're going through is really important. But how you choose to define these things is totally up to you. And I do believe that any argument against doing these things is really a selfish argument. And we kind of tossed around these ideas of in the green room of needing to kind of run through degrees faster to get guys in and to fill chairs and to do all these things. But quite honestly, that is not a candidate-centric attitude. That is a lodge-centric attitude. And Masonry exists, in my belief, and I think you'd have a really hard time convincing me otherwise on this one, but it exists to improve the character, to make good men better. Well, that's a candidate-centric vision and mission that has nothing to do with the lodge. Now, yeah, I get the lodge has to exist for that to be the case, but there are plenty of lodges, and lodges aren't going to go anywhere, and good men will find lodges. That's not going to happen. I don't believe that side of the argument. So if you don't have time for this, do yourself a favor, do Masonry a favor, and don't sign the petition. If that guy's going to come in, have a bad experience, and then leave Masonry a year later, encourage him or let him go to the lodge down the street or a couple towns over, who is going to give the guy a full bang up job. So that's my bit on initiation. We're going to shift into mentoring a little bit, and I would say that the reason why this is a gap within the industry, or within the world rather, is that we really don't have post-education role models to look up to outside of masonry. I think that's a real concern. You look at when we go to schools. Actually, I'm jumping up ahead in my bullets. So really, 3 examples. I'll tell you, the original version of this presentation, I actually had photos of my governmental leaders, my church leaders, and my sports and entertainment figures who are all some version of failed moral role models. And I took them out, needless to say. I never gave that version of the presentation. But I think we can all look at those bullets and think of a handful of people that fall into each of those categories, that really aren't the best people, aren't the people we want our children looking up to, and really our own selves. We shouldn't be looking to any of these folks, because that's not their job. Their job isn't to be a moral role model. Their job is to run the government, or to run a church, or to run, to run the football. I think in addition, when we go through school, it's largely a sterile environment where morals aren't really truly tested. I'm a firm believer. I've graduated from graduate school. I'm a firm believer in education. My wife works in education, but it's just the nature of the structure. You go in and you might talk about ethics and morality, but one of the things that's a challenge is, at the end of the day, you're going to go to your dorm and you're going to have your meal card to buy your meal. And if you disagree, or if you point out that someone's cheating on an exam, you're still going to have those things. In the real world, though, when you start working and you start looking around and you're like, that's not really right. Those people are stealing that software and using it against the end user license agreement, or they're downloading research that they haven't paid for. And to bring those things up, well, if you're going to be the whistleblower there, there's a concern there. And now all of a sudden you have to take into the factors of, hey, if this blows up and blows back on me, how am I going to feed my family? So now all of a sudden you have a much more serious moral test than I think what you have, what you're presented with in schools. And so I'll say that when millennials are coming into lodges, we're looking for men to help us get us through our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. We come in and we don't have these venues, these places to go to and say, hey, I don't like this one thing that's going on at work, or I'm struggling with this thing that's happening at home, and I don't know how to deal with that and do the right thing, do the upstanding thing. We need men who have been through a lot of these same experiences to help guide us through that. And that's where I think the lodge plays a significant role. As you can see, this is a gap that masonry can fill. So what do we do with these 2 gaps? Again, we have a gap on the initiatory side that just isn't something that we really experience in the world anymore. And it's definitely, I think, a useful experience. And then on the other side, we have the elements of mentorship. And so what we can do is, lodge members, as people on today's talk, listening to this, is treat these things as being both essential and fundamental to the craft. So personally understand the value of both initiation and mentoring in our lives and in the lives of our initiates. So what this means, this personally understand, means you need to spend time reflecting and understand that image where I said you have your new self or your current self, and make sure that you understand the change that the initiation created, that kind of differs you currently from your old self. But then also look for ways in which mentoring has lacked in your life and where you wish you had a mentor. Look for ways where mentoring has been really helpful, and where you can go and find support and make sure that you're providing these supportive efforts back to the members of your lodge. Take our time. You know, we need the guys who are well informed and not just a dues check. And I don't want to spiral off on this one, but I think it's pretty straightforward. You're on one or two sides of this position, but I do think, you know, in general, just take your time. Make sure that the guys understand the lessons. You know, we talked about proficiency in the green room. Make sure that it's not just I memorized some stuff, but you know how to apply the tools. You know, one of the things that I've done with most of the people that I've obligated is I make sure that they come back before their next degree, have them stand up and say, and talk about how they've taken something from the preceding degree and applied it in their life and made a difference. Like if we are providing a template or a rubric or tools in which you are going to, you know, improve your life, well, from the get-go, we need to make sure that that guys are understanding that that's the process, that it requires, you know, it's not just a 24-inch gauge, but there's some value, there's some use to that, and you need to be working to apply it. So that comes from taking our time. It's not going to happen in a week, probably not even going to happen in a month. And so, yeah, just to drill in on that, comprehension is every bit as valuable as rote memory. I've evolved a lot on this particular bullet, and this was some of what we kicked around earlier, but memory is important. You know, that's one of the ways in which we ingrain the lessons and really inculcate the lessons within our being. And so that's important. But understanding it is just important. Understanding the words you're saying is just as important. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we can, and you all have to try harder. So to wrap things up here, and we're going to wrap up with plenty of time for discussion. I see a lot going on in the chat room, but I will say that the challenge here is to be the top gun of Masonic experience. Your lodges, they respect you. Very likely, I think if you're spending your time while you're stuck at home listening to me drone on about Masonic education, then chances are you're the Masonic education dude in your lodge, and many, at least some of your members come to you, you know, with that, looking for guidance as a result. So take the degrees seriously. Take every single one. If you're on the sidelines, take it seriously. If you're obligating, take it seriously, and then everything in between. And then talk to your lodges about how important these elements are. You know, make sure that they understand that this is why you're taking it seriously, that you're supposed to be imparting some knowledge or some expansion of consciousness onto a person. And that's what people are coming looking for. You want to joke around, that's going to ruin the experience, and those guys are going to leave, and we're going to lose them forever. Work with the lodges to improve the initiatic experience. There's so many ways to do this. There's tons of books out there. I shouldn't say tons, but there's a handful of books out there that talk about the ways lodges, even within the confines of the jurisdictional rules, are improving the initiatic experience. So learn what your jurisdiction says and make sure that you're running right up to the line, because that's what people are looking for. Take on a mentee. No one is excused from having both a mentee and a mentor, and having a mentor, unless you're, you know, really the oldest 5% of the organization. But even still, I've got some mentors who are a couple years younger than me. And you know, I think you can learn a lot from everyone, and make sure that you're recognizing that there's something to be learned from all the guys around you. And if that's not the case, you should visit other lodges, because that's the case in at least some lodges. I do have the bullet in here still. It says do the intended program. That, of course, is Illinois' program. But if you have a guided program, use those things. Use the tools that your Grand Lodges are putting out for you. We put a lot of effort in making sure that they are polished programs and that they're really useful. If you've been through it and you need something else, go look at any number of other programs. Grand Lodge of Ohio has a great program. Grand Lodge of North Carolina has some really cool resources. All the lodges of research are really great resources. There is tons and tons and tons for you to be doing. There's no such thing as Masonic retirement. Again, you have a duty. I mean, you look at anything that Albert Pike talks about duty. You have a responsibility to be working and to be useful to your fellow men. And so I can't stress this enough that there's not a point where you can go, all right, I'm finally out of the East, I can retire. And I'm not saying that means, okay, now it's time to start moving up the line in the chapter. I'm saying that just means you can't stop. You know, you're out of the East. Well, there's a new guy in the East who needs some support, some mentoring. There's other guys who are going through the degrees who need some support and mentoring. And so that's, I think, a really critical thing to remember, is that there's really never a time in Masonry where it's officially the time to pop your shoes off and put your feet up. What I tell my wife is the official FU position, feet up. That is, you're not done with your work, and there's always development to get done. And that's what I got. I think we screamed through this. I don't know how, because I've had this spill into an hour 20 minutes in the past. But yeah, that's what I got. Other questions? Anything anyone wants to go into detail?
Brother Scott, I actually think that we have several conversations going on in the chat room that we might want to highlight. And if you don't mind sticking around a little bit, that we can facilitate this. We have quite a few people on, so let me go with folks raising their hand. But Dago, if you want to start off with this, I know that you were saying some pretty cool stuff there.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey.
I agree totally with what Scott is saying about, it's not about, retiring ever when you're in a lodge, especially when you had a leadership position and brought something to it. It's really interesting when you have an eager lodge master create some sort of educational program his year, and the minute he's out of the East, that educational program disappears. And then he comes to visit and says, hey, whatever happened to this thing that I started? And then I ask him, well, where have you been? Yeah, I kind of see it like fatherhood in a way, or motherhood, where you have a child and you have to nurture it, you have to cultivate it, and you have to see it all the way through. And there is no retirement in that either, right? There's just a bunch of work that you have to put into it. And so that's on Scott's final point that I really enjoyed that he made it clear for us, because it doesn't stop, and you should never turn your back on your lodge, especially if you were in a leadership position, to contribute more and help inspire others to contribute in their own way. Because a lodge is made up of many stones and many bricks, if you will, and those are the ones that hold it together. And that's what it's about, lifting each other up. And it's a beautiful hub to, as long as, like what I say, as long as you don't burn the lodge down, get your charter pulled, or make it go bankrupt, experimenting within your own bubble of a lodge should be okay, right? This is where you come to share ideas and should be able to expand on them. So so this kind of open discourse should be definitely brought up and discussed in those boring stated meetings, if you will. But I also feel that we should be aware of what the culture in your lodge is about and what your lodge wants to focus on, and become experts in that. If you want to be an educational lodge, how can you be the best educational lodge in your area, in your city, your county, your state for that matter, and get everybody on board in your lodge and focus on that. So when you have visitors and possible candidates, you're already waving the flag saying, look, this is the kind of lodge that we are, and these are the expectations that we're going to have from you. And that is how you guard the West Gate. Because what we do before we even vote on the candidate, we have a candidates night where we sit them down and we go over all the steps of becoming an entered apprentice Mason and the transition between first and second degree. And we say, if you don't come to those classes that we have for you, don't expect to get past to the second degree. If you don't do your 5-10 minute presentation, don't expect to get past to the next degree. And this is beyond the catechism that they have to memorize and the booklet that the Grand Lodge has them fill out. So there's already a set culture that we're establishing with the incoming members that this is what's expected at this lodge. But hey, if you just want to barbecue and hang out with the guys, you know, then there's that lodge over there that does it really well that you might be more interested in. That way, we don't see you drop off after you get your first degree because it was just too much information, it was too overwhelming, and it's not what you thought it was going to be. So there's a clear transparency from the beginning from us, so there's no turning back. And if they don't stay, well, they don't stay. Then it wasn't for them. But I think the idea of how can we keep them? You know, a lodge is not about 500, 5,000 members. It's about a small concentration of members that belief system and believe in the philosophy of this craft. So I don't know, sometimes I feel that we try too hard to figure out ways to keep them engaged when the question should be, what keeps you engaged? And maybe that's going to help lay the foundation to keep others like you engaged in the lodge as well. That's my diatribe.
Very cool.
One of the
Real quick. Oh, I'm so sorry. Real quick, I'm gonna kind of answer with Paul. So you guys, do you suggest that directors that they're going out and check out new lodges or other lodges that may perhaps not necessarily, you know, be better than yours or something like that, but just maybe a better fit for me or candidates? Yes.
Did you? What's the question, Rand? Did you hear him? You were breaking up a little bit.
So unfortunately, Brother Parth has a very tenuous internet connection at times, and it's actually become a running joke, unfortunately. But I believe that he was talking about exactly what you were saying. What is the threshold that you want to create within your own lodge before you start pushing or suggesting that a person goes to a different lodge?
Well, you ask, we ask him questions of it. We say, what are you looking for? Like, what excites you? What got you interested in Masonry? What were you researching or looking at that made you want to choose this lodge? Because in California, if you go through the Grand Lodge, they'll give you a list of lodges in your area that you could visit, and then it's up to that individual to figure out which one he wants to stop by at. So I don't know where that threshold is. I think it's just a mutual understanding that, you know, I'm a chess player. Why am I going to go to the high school that has the no chess and the best football team? Right?
Right.
I'm not ever going to be that player.
Totally on board with you, man. I really agree with what you're saying. But I think one of the issues we sort of run into is that sometimes lodges tend to have some different types of people going on, which is totally awesome and totally cool. But it really kind of gets to this point. There's still an old guard that's worried about numbers, I think, personally. They'll kind of take a warm body without really thinking about it, which is unfortunate in my opinion.
Did you catch that? I actually did catch that one. So there's an old guard that definitely looks out towards the warm bodies. The Grand Lodge push towards getting greater membership numbers. And Joe Martinez minces no words into the chat room. Old guard needs to go gentle into that good night. But let me mix up what Parth was saying with something that Scott Schwartzberg put in there. And he said, we do this. Let candidates know that we do have brothers who specialize, but we focus on education and mentoring, and can and have sent them to visit another lodge. And So the culture of the lodge, I've quick observation on my part, and I'll turn it back over to you guys. The cultures of the lodge, when we've brought candidates in well ahead of entered apprentice, and not only allowed but really wanted them to come and be a part of the lodge activities, external activities, before the entered apprentice ever comes around, has made a difference. I'm gonna stop there and let you guys take it from there.
Well, I think you need to have that interpersonal relationship with your members before they join, right? But I think there was a time, and we had this issue with our past masters. Why do you want them to come and visit the lodge for 6 months before they can put in an application? And because in our day, as soon as they walked in the door, if we liked them, we just handed them the application, and it was fine. I was like, well, where are they now? You talk about this golden age where you had 10 degrees on a Saturday night, and where are all those members that you gave those 10 degrees for? Show me something they left behind at the lodge, a mural, a statue, or anything that really made a difference for having this quantity of members flow through the lodge just to pat your own self on the back that year. That makes no sense. And if you give it time to make sure we're all the right fit, maybe they'll find that investment that's been made in them, they'll return that investment back to the lodge. And one brought a point which is interesting. He said, well, if you give that member enough time to come around before he applies, people will find a reason not to like him and allow him to join the lodge. And I didn't know what to think about that comment. I was just kind of like, well, then that's really not Masonry, is it? Right. And what kind of Masons have we been allowing in our lodges that will be so, I guess, superficial and discount somebody over some simple disagreement, what they wear, the way they do their hair? I don't know.
Was that rhetorical, Dago, or do you really want an answer to that question?
Yeah, give me an answer.
Do it.
Talking about hair.
Well, I mean,
about hair.
You just hit the nail on the head. I mean,
where are you? I don't see you. Oh, there you are.
Oh, hi. I'm the handsome bald guy. I mean, honestly, and I've been raging about this for years. It's a different time for Masonry. We are not, I'm definitely not a social club Mason, and the types of people that I talk to, the types of people that I want to bring in, the types of people I associate with, they're not social club Masons. And I say this all the time. I'm like, you need to give me a reason why I am gonna not be with my wife and kids 1 or 2 or 3 nights a week. And just to sit there and have coffee and shoot the shit with you is not a good enough reason. There's got to be something to it. And the people that we seem to be bringing in the lodge, back to Scott's point about that generational demographic, they're not looking for that either. They're not looking for a reason to get away from their wives and go have coffee and just whine and complain about their lives. We are getting different types of people that are wanting to become members, and we need to be appreciative of that. And back to the old guard comment, they don't know how to process that. It's unfortunately the sad reality. They just don't.
So, Brother Scott, we've talked around some of the topics that you've broached in the presentation. What say you?
I think we're kind of circling around a lot of the same positions that I have, and really the reasons why we put this together. I'll tell you, this talk was originally created for the AMD Council, and they asked me, we want to know about millennial Masonry, and I was like, well, that's not fair for me to step in and say, this is how every millennial experiences Masonry. This is, I can tell you my perspective, but then I started to think about, like, let's think about it, what we know broadly about Masons or about millennials, and see where Masonry can really inject value into the lives of our communities and into the lives of individual members. And, as someone who, when I'm employed, I make a living off of, driving a product value. And so, if you're an organization, you have a physical, you might not be a physical product, but you have a product that you're providing. It's a softer product, but you have a responsibility. If you're taking someone's money, even if that's $12 a year, you're taking somebody's money, and you better be giving them $12 worth of something back. And if $12 isn't enough to really draw, if you can't create any value out of that $12, that's my soapbox on the dues experience and the dues inequality. But I think that if you're running into that, that's something you need to take a hard look at. And I'm certain everyone here, or many of the guys that at least I talk with on a regular basis who are in here, have all experienced so how much is it to join the lodge? And they go, oh, really? That's it? I've had that happen so many times until I made my lodge really expensive to join. So now it's no longer the case, but I think you need to consider these things, and you need to look at like a product, because that's the only way to create a sustainable model, a business model that's going to last for any amount of time.
Well, the question I think is what is the value, right? What is the value of your Masonic experience? What is the value of Masonry, which is the question we throw when dues are getting raised, and we have everybody all of a sudden show up at a stated meeting, complain about not raising the. Somebody gets up and says, well, how much do you value this? Right? You come out of the woodwork.
You might need to create value first. Sometimes you have to lead with the value. It's really tough for, you look at what Kia went through. They came on the markets with really cheap cars, and they've kind of evolved into not, a pretty mid-run, mid-level kind of car manufacturer. So it's very similar that over time you have to incrementally increase the value. And what I talked about tonight, two ways that really every lodge should be looking to increase their value. You could be an education lodge or not. You could be something that has some more affinitive type element, but everyone is creating initiation, and everyone is supposed to be doing some mentoring. And so that's an area where we can all increase the value. And you can do that on a lodge level, a macro, and you can also do it on a micro level, kind of individually. If you're a guy who's like, man, I want my lodge experience to be better, well, mentoring guys and making sure that the initiation experience is top notch.
I had a couple of points I wanted to bring up. One is something that it may not be relevant in these situations where you have a candidate who spends 6 months before you even give them a petition. My experience was more guy comes in, seems like a decent guy, hand him a petition, and boom, he becomes a Mason very quickly. And what took on is some important to was that candidates oftentimes they Masonry sounds interesting. For whatever reason, it's piqued their interest, and they go ahead and petition, but they don't really know what they're petitioning for. And then once they actually go through the degrees, they're very disillusioned with what it's turned out to be. It didn't match what was in their head, whatever they had in their head. And largely, we don't tell them, right? It's shrouded in mystery and cached in sort of flowery language. So what I used to do was to try to rip away the mystique without giving away any secrets. I tried to be more realistic about their expectations about what the experience was going to be like. And I think that can be helpful. And then I'd also like to make a sort of a point about in defense of the social Freemason, because I used to actually use that as part of my sales pitch. And your point is valid. If you don't want to be away from your wife to go hang out with some guys for a few hours and have a meal and share, that part of it. But actually, that's the thing I still go back for and is part of my sales pitch, because our society has changed. What I like to tell people is, what did what did Americans do when there was no such thing as a television set? Or even go back before that, there was no such thing as a radio. Everybody belonged to clubs. It wasn't just the dad was in Freemasonry, the mom was in Eastern Star, and the daughter was in this, and everyone was involved in all these clubs that would fill their time every night of the week. And then when radio came out and then television, people, I'm going to watch I Love Lucy tonight. Do I really want to go out? And people, and now as time has gone on with computers and cell phones and automation, we have lost this social glue that used to, everybody felt like they were all part of the same community and the same society, and we've given that up. So to me, Masonry is this little it's very old-fashioned. It's one little piece where we can still nurture these social bonds. Where when we go to have a lodge meeting, and there's a point where the master goes around and everybody talks about sickness and distress, and you're actually sharing this with other men that you care about. We don't have that in our society anymore, except for Freemasonry. So I sort of champion that. And I do get a little exhausted going where all I hear is about what's wrong with Masonry. And I'm like, it's not that wrong to me. I'm having a good time. I'm having a positive experience. I don't need to know about the ancient Mesopotamians or the ancient Egyptians to improve my experience of Freemasonry. It's fine just the way it is. I also am not an esoteric Freemason. When I do ritual, I do not have psychic vibes from I don't have any of that. And I fully respect other Masons who care deeply about the history and want to share that, or they get some sort of deeper, God bless them. I'm not taking it, but I don't. That's not me. And I enjoy the social aspect. I enjoy the meal. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy the shared experience. And I guess I'd like to speak positively on that. That's enough for me to get me out of my house. And I quite enjoy it. I think it's something that we should encourage people to have in their lives. I think it's a hole in their lives they don't realize is there. So that's my little soapbox on that topic.
I don't know if it was from comments that I made or somewhere else in the chat here, but I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think we were talking before we came in, or actually I was on a call with Chad Kopinski, who's in this in the chat room tonight, but we were talking about it earlier. And my current lodge experience is I show up to prep at about between 5 and 5:15. And we open lodge at about 5:30, and we close lodge at 9:30. We walk across the street. We have a festive board, and I'm not hitting the road until midnight on most nights, and some nights are 1:30. So I think you can do all the things and all those things, but it goes back to Dago's point that it's what's your lodge into, and what are you interested in. But I'm all for the elements of the social Masonry. I would be cautious the only distinction I would draw is that I don't think that's what Masonry is. From a philosophical level, there's a philosophy there, and that's where it's essentially there's something to be taught and learned. So that's critical. But I think I think it's really enjoyable to go out with the guys who are on that road towards growth together with you.
Yeah, and you raised a different point. I mean, you just described a scenario where you're dedicating 6 hours to a meeting. That's clearly too damn much. So there's got to be a balance.
That's once a month. I don't know. I mean, we have 80% of our members show up every month, so it's not and that's an average, I should say. So it's not too much for the lodge. We're just providing the product that people are looking for, which is always the key. That's not going to work at every lodge.
So I think there has to be a balance between the social Mason and the education in order to have a good balanced lodge, because not all the guys are going to want to delve into the education, and not all the guys are going to want to, just have it be a social hour every single meeting. It brings me back to my first experience with a lodge research. and I had traveled up to New Hampshire, and they did the lodge research, and afterwards they went upstairs and they did like a festive board, and they had the table set up in a horseshoe, and no one knew what was going on. You just took a seat, and when the meal came out, they said, okay, we're having a debate, and they split the tables in half, and the debate was, should the esoteric part of masonry be discussed in open lodge? And I just happened to be put on the side where I was supposed to debate against, which I wanted to debate for, but it made me think outside of the box. And I had to reflect, and I was thinking that when a candidate is coming through masonry and they're on the outside of the door, if you have a good junior deacon, the junior deacon tells the candidate to reach out, feel for the knocker, and knock on the door. Now, flash forward to this conversation where we're talking about social masonry and education. You might get a mason in the door who's there for the social experience, who's there to hang out with the guys and talk about work and stuff like that. But eventually they may be experienced or exposed to some of the Masonic education, and all of a sudden it's like a flag goes up or a light comes on. And next thing you know, this guy who was just there for the social aspect is picking up Masonic books and talking philosophy and really working on improving themselves. So I think you do need that mix. You need that healthy mixture of both the social aspect and education. I don't know. That's my two cents, I guess.
So you're talking a balance. Okay. So there's a balance in what we do and how we do it. Some lodges are going to focus a little bit more on one than the other. But overall, that you're saying that there's a balance and that we should strive for that balance. Okay. I see that. Lynn,
And-
you had I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I really kind of disagree with the idea if a guy is really into just the social aspect that we should redirect him to another lodge. That sits wrong with me. I think, yes, someone should find a lodge that's the right fit for them, but to kind of turn them away and say, oh, well, you belong better over there, doesn't seem like what we're all about.
Yeah, and I agree with you exactly. What I meant by that is, like, sometimes when we let them know that there's going to be presentations and material that they're going to need to read, they don't want to read. They don't want to like put time into that sort of thing. So is it an appropriate fit? Are we just going to, not going to be providing what they're looking for in a lodge? And so there are lodges that don't really have an educational program that they put their members through, and we usually actually get those social lodges sending us over their visitors that want to focus on the educational side too. So it isn't like you're not good enough for us, go over there. It's, look, this is what we offer, and if it's going to be too overwhelming, too much for you, if you're too busy, because sometimes that's what we hear, I have a busy schedule, I just have enough time to show up to the meetings and that's all I have time for, then okay, then this might not be, compatible to your schedule at this time. And if you want to crash our classes, we invite our local lodges to come and sit in when we have these classes so they can get some of the information that we give our members, so their members have it, if there's even an inkling of wanting to learn some more. But you're right, it shouldn't be very elitist and like there's a line drawn and we're this and we're that. But I think we're all careful when we decide what college, if we're going to go to college, we're going to go to, right? We just don't really go to the college next door. We go for the college that best fits what we're looking for, what kind of degree we want. And I think lodges, I kind of see lodges in the same way. They're not wrong for being different and focusing on different concentrations and things. It's just a different approach to gain the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I full-heartedly agree with that everyone needs a good mentor. I know that we try to do like a designated mentor program for a little while, and it kind of fell to the wayside, unfortunately. But like as a past master, I try to do that in my lodge, like pick out a couple guys, you know, a handful of guys, and give them advice and try to steer them in the right direction. And I think that the lodges that fail are the lodges that aren't really doing that, and they're not maintaining as much membership.
Very cool.
And you know what's also important, sorry to cut you, Randy, but also inviting visitors to visit other lodges. We encourage other visitors when they visit, yeah, this is our lodge. Is this the first lodge you visited? Yes. Oh, well, you know, there's this one over here, this one over here, this one over here. Please go check them out. So when you make your final decision as to which lodge you want to apply to, you know 110% undoubtedly that this is the lodge that you connect to the most. And we absolutely encourage them to go to other lodges and ask questions. Ask them what their calendar is like. Ask them what they have fun doing, what if they have an educational program, or if not, what some lodges take a yearly trip outside of the state. Check them out, see where they're going to go this year. Maybe you might be. So I think it's important to let them see the breadth of Masonry and how varied it is. And the kind of, because once you join one lodge, you're joining all of us here. So it's a matter of understanding how big and eclectic and eccentric this group really is and far reaching, and how certain lodges just kind of focus on certain things. So which one do you fit in? And I think that empowers them more to make a better decision and stay at your lodge.
I would add that then, you know, encouraging that through their degree process. Now, different states have different regulations on this, but in some of the states I've been a member of, you could go visit anywhere, you know, in the middle of your degrees. You'd be a first, second, go see the degrees anywhere else. And so we do that here. And I think that that's really helpful because for the candidates who you know are going to be a good fit for the program and the product that you're putting out there, they go and they visit other lodges and they come back, and almost invariably they go, oh wow, I now know what I'm getting that I wouldn't be that I'm not getting there, that's not fulfilling my needs there. And I think to Tim's question, I keep trying to work our way back to Tim's question, but that would be one of the tangible things that, you know, when our candidates go through and then they go visit another lodge and they're like, oh, they did this a little bit differently. And I was like, and we'd ask, you know, is that good or bad, or what do you think? And it's, well, you know, it's good for them. It's not really for me. And that's just kind of continues to remind each other that there are going to be differences in every lodge. And we want to connect with I personally want to connect with the guys that are really going to get along well and develop the egregore of my own lodge. That to me is as the master, you're kind of you're standing over the witch's kettle, kind of brewing the egregore and making sure that that's creating a positive experience, and that if everyone's experience is building on each other's. And if you put a guy who is not going to fit, I don't like that. And I think that you have to be really careful about that, but really trying to work my way back to Tim's question, which was about tangible things that are different, you know, that are measurable differences. I think it's really tough. This is such a soft product that it becomes difficult, but I think you have to look at over time the attendance and the membership. You know, so looking at, is your membership growing over time? Is your attendance, you know, the percentage of your total membership, is that staying pretty constant, or is that growing? Are you improving? I think that's one of the only metrics that we have to assess, you know, how well our product fits with what our audience is looking for. And so to me, that's what I'm doing. You know, as the product manager of the lodge, I'm trying to create the experience that is going to keep guys engaged. It's the same thing that Netflix does. You know, they're trying to create the shows that are going to keep people on their platform and not lose them to Hulu or not lose them to a really awesome Masonic Lodge. They're trying to keep you engaged there. And so if you can look at anything that's a metric related to those things, that would be my answer. But let me know if that doesn't answer your question, or if you have follow-up questions to that.
Brother Tim?
Thanks, brother. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
Dueball.
Dueball. Okay. Tim. Thanks. No, that started to get into it a little bit. I'm only saying this just as I'm a past master and I'm a senior warden in another lodge, different jurisdiction now, and I'm, a big fan of the. I don't like to use the word observe it, but I guess well planned and thought out masonry, and so I'm just always interested to meet new brothers who have that and can share some of those different experiences. I know typically the answer is around lodges, they tend to talk about the experience for the candidates, and it's real easy to put a dollar figure on initiation fees, when you're doing things like, hey, I'm getting this guy a great apron, or a great Bible, and these are costs that you can tie to it. But for me, I've found that the bigger challenge is when that guy has been a Mason in that lodge 6 years, 8 years, what are those enriching things that make Masonry, when cooked in a $50 burger versus a $3 burger. They're both burgers, but what are those things that can be done to enrich that and make the value added for the long term, to the individual. And so, yeah, no, those were great examples, and thanks, that answered my question.
Yeah, I think the other thing we do, speaking to transparency, which I brought up in the presentation, the other thing that we work to do is be transparent about the money that we have and how it's being spent. And when we just went through the chartering process, so we're still a pretty young lodge, but we pitched the idea to the group of members, or to a group of the members who later became members of our lodge, and we said, look, we're going to spend, half. It's a lot of money. It's more, I should say, it's more than what we're used to spending on dues, but we're going to spend half of that on education. And so that's my commitment to you, that's what we're doing. And again, that's not going to be great for everyone, but for the members for the experience I was looking for, that I felt I was lacking and that I wanted to create, and I felt like there were other members who had that. That's what we needed to deliver on, and so that's what we work to do. Of course, in COVID, it's tricky because we're losing speakers left and right. They're not coming out to visit, so we'll have a surplus going into next year. But I think that making sure that people know how we're spending the money is also really critical.
I think strategic planning is a big part of it. I love esoteric and philosophical stuff personally. But I know that I've done this before, where you have a group of esoteric Masons that are just, everyone in that group is into that. They're not always the most reliable people for the monthly stuff to keep things going. And I found that it's like beneficial to do strategic planning and like get not just an educator, but maybe a member who's a college professor to help develop like a long-term curriculum, not just like a semester's worth or, a year's worth, but, long-term, developmental training goals for the group, rather than, just always focused on near term, and, have guys that are good at financial planning, and also rotating guys around in different positions, not rotating through a line necessarily, but hey, you've been an education guy for a while. Why don't you be a secretary for a while? because that prevents burnout, but also, engages their mind in different ways and kind of balances the membership out. It's hard to have a long-term, director and personnel management program like that, but those are just some of the things that I think about.
What jurisdiction are you in?
Right now, I'm in Virginia.
Okay.
Other lodges in North Carolina. I'm retired from the Army and moved to Northern Virginia for work, and I'm involved with my lodge in Virginia now.
Nice.
What about
Brother
you?
Scott, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor for the moment to wrap it up. I'm going to turn the recording off, and then we can continue on discussion. We're still also live on Facebook. We'll turn that off here probably within the next 10 minutes or so. But if you want to do some quick wrap-ups, Brother James, before
I did want to. Could I say something real quick about something Tim said earlier? I think one of the most important ways to think about adding value is making candidates feel valued. Are we all familiar with compounding interest? As the whole idea is like, well, would I rather put effort and money into this at a younger age or at an older age? And it's the younger age. So, I mean, I see a lot of lodges wherever I've traveled focusing on the experience after you're a master mason. Oh, get to master so you can do the cool stuff. But I personally believe it's a journey of getting to that point. And, it's like going on an adventure. You can't just show up in the Arctic, and not know how to use the $10,000 worth of tools you have. You have to go through training, and that's not just money, that's time and effort. So I'd say putting effort into the journey. And again, like I said earlier, customizing it to the individual. I think that's a huge part that we often get wrong.
interesting.
Can I
Good-
add something
good
here?
comments. Go ahead, Brother Michael.
So, you all know that I like the esoteric and philosophical discussions as much as anybody. But I got to tell you that the most meaningful stuff to me, Ryan and I are in the same lodge, is, last year we had a 100-year-old Mason, past master, raise a candidate. And that candidate said that he felt connected to the lodge because he had a 100-year-old man raise him, because that's all the guy wanted to do for his birthday. We had another member join that you heard me talk about, that marched in Selma, Alabama. Like, that's not philosophical. I'm not talking about masonry, so to say, but that's one of the coolest thing ever. And that man loves drinking scotch. So I would just set him up with the young guys and be like, hey, go drink scotch with Bill. And they all loved it. They all appreciated it. I'm like, he's not going to be here forever. So, some of the older guys would be like, why do you keep setting him up with Bill? He'll never stop drinking. And I got to tell you, like, Scott's had those 6-hour meetings. We have those a lot at Brigham. I left one night at 3:45 in the morning. My wife was not very happy with me, but it's because that's where all my friends are. And like, you could give me the most philosophical lodge in the world, and I still go to Brigham every night of the week because that's home, and I wrote an article before that if the lights are on at Brigham, I know everything's all right in the world. So I think that connection is important. It's just as important as the program sometimes. And that's that, those mentors I met, those guys, that 100-year-old Mason, the guy that marched to Selma, Alabama. I was talking to another member tonight. He closed they had schools in Massachusetts that really, really abused mentally challenged people. And he was one of the guys that closed those schools. He was one of the leading guys that did that. If I never sat down and have a scotch or a wine with these guys, I might never know that if I just sat and watched the program. So I think we need to make sure that it's balanced, like it was said a little bit in here. And I know, I know Scott pretty well, and I know he feels the same way about that. But I think all those aspects are important.
Yeah, and I know that earlier we had talked about, a little bit about like vetting candidates, when they're coming to the lodge, and making sure that what they're looking for is right. I think we also need to instill in them that they are going to have to put that effort in. I see a lot of candidates who come through, they make the 3rd degree, they're a master mason, they kind of look around like, okay, well, now what? And it's like, well, now the ball's in your court. You know, you're part of the team and you got to take the ball and run with it. You know, eventually they have to realize that, you know, we're not just going to hold their hand through every single part of masonry, and they're going to have to put some effort in. So I understand, like, yes, we need to give them a good product. They are coming to our lodge and they have certain expectations, and we need to meet those expectations, but we need to instill in them that eventually they're going to have to create expectation for someone else, that, you know, the job is going to fall in, you know, in their hands.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. Brother Scott, you have last words, and then I'm gonna hit the record button and we'll continue some chat.
Yeah, I think we've had some wonderful discussion here tonight. I think that I'm not sure I introduced new things to anyone, but just hopefully pushed on some older things to say, hey, it's time to go back and relook at this, especially in the world that we're living in now. How are we doing this? What changes are we going to make when we go back to life, you know, living together, you know, commingling? What are we going to be able to do in the lodges? How can we be doing mentoring right now? How is initiation going to change or stay the same? And hopefully I've given you all some things to think about. Hopefully I've given you, at the very least, a couple books to go back and take a look at. And if you need to follow up, you know, shoot me a message on Facebook or whatever, and I'll get you those titles.
Awesome. And Brother Mike, you have an announcement for us?
Thank you. So for those of you that may not have seen it, if you're not doing something else tomorrow night at 7:00 Eastern time, Tony Chrysos is going to do a talk on the Orphic tradition, ancient and modern. For those of you who think that might be something that's 2,000 years in our past, it's not. It's still going on, and that's what he's going to talk about. So if you're interested in that, just message me privately so I can share the Zoom with you. We're not going to stream it, and we're not going to. We might record it just for his use, and he can make a decision later. But being Greek, you know, sometimes communities react in different ways, so we're just going to keep that to ourselves. So if you are interested, then let me know.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we cut the recording. We're still live on Facebook. Got some good discussion going on Facebook too. Thank you folks for joining us that way. Much appreciated, those that have still hung on. There's, let's see, and I'm looking. Oh, thank you, Brother Christopher. Much appreciated. Always good to hang with you, and hopefully we'll get to do so in person here soon. All right, continuing on this conversation, I took a couple of notes that I kind of want to throw out there and let people respond to. And Brother Tim was talking about, what are we packaging? What value are we giving to folks? What are we able to provide? And the tenets, you know, the brotherhood, relief, and truth are the three things that I'm going to throw back as a response to that. But let me add in here, what do we do that's different? You know, Elks, the Moose, the Lions Club, the Civitans, they got brotherhood. Relief, well, if you look at it from a purely charity point of view, you know, I've got the same groups, right? All right. Truth, we're narrowing this down a little bit. And then the truth part is, I think, where we're going to find the entertaining piece and possibly a topic for discussion. Because within truth, I find three things that came to me, one of which was Brother Scott's and some of the topics here. The first one is I'm going to go with transparency in all things. So transparency, just straight up. How many places can you go right now and understand that the concept behind it, the entire premise behind it is transparency, that we are on the level, straight up. The next thing is an engagement, a mental engagement that you're not going to find in other organizations or other structures. That mental engagement is something that, you know, through ritual, through the working through the tenets is going to be very clear. All right, and that's going to be the engagement is an important part. But the third may be the most important, and that is a topic we've explored in a couple of other talks, and that is we are creating a sacred space together. So those three things, to transparency in all things, engagement mentally, and the creation of that sacred space, those three things come together in the lodge. They come together within the person, they come together within the community. I get it, and that's where the lodge actually fits. But packaging that's a soft package. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm a marketing major, because I'm not. But the understanding, a deeper understanding that those are the things that we create, that we can put out there, and we can use ourselves, not only showing other people in ourselves and in our actions, but then allowing them to interact with us so that they see that. Now, those are the three: brotherhood, relief, truth, sacred space, engagement, mental engagement, and transparency in all things are the things that came to mind when I was listening to the conversation here. And I'd really like to hear your thoughts and responses to that. All of you, not at once. Oh, don't tell me I have Parth's connection and you can't hear every other word, right?
No,
Okay.
we're good.
Hey, listen.
Sorry, I'm eating
Just
crab.
because you're known for one thing.
What'd you say, Parth? Parth, I can't hear you.
Ouch. Be nice, Parth. We're
That's
still
when
streaming.
I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. You'll miss me one day. You'll miss me one day.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Randy Davis, we haven't heard from you very much, except for just then. What do you think about the sacred space, engagement, and transparency? Am I anywhere near the hitting the mark there? What say you?
I think that you're pretty much on the money. The thing that I've seen is that in my experience, a lot of lodges can't keep, let's call it equilibrium, and trying to balance things out. And like I had mentioned in comments earlier, the problem I see in a number of lodges that I visited is that it always ends up being the same handful of brothers that are running everything in the lodge. It always comes down to the same handful. They're doing the cooking, they're doing the cleaning, they're setting up the lodge room, then they're running the actual meeting and doing the degree work, and there just isn't enough time in the day to get things done. And not to take away from what Scott brought up on his topic tonight, but in addition to providing that new member an awesome experience, because that's going to be, first impressions are everything. But we need to be working on, at the same time as providing that first impression, we need to be getting these other members that are hanging around. Some are on the sidelines, some of them are at home watching television, to come back to lodge and be more than just a dues paying member. And like I said, you know, providing a good experience to the candidate coming in is, you know, top of the list things that we've got to do, because, you know, we've had this conversation down at the Scottish Rite as well. You know, without providing that first impression, you know, somebody's going to come in and you're literally going to say, that's it, because that's what I did.
I think you're going to do that even in the lodges who are doing things really well. It caused me to create one of the talks I give is on the first degree, because I think that's totally natural. Even if you're doing all the things that you're supposed to do right, there's still an element of, okay, so I came in, I walked around and I said some things and then I was done. And you get that. It's natural to say that's it. And so I created a presentation that says, well, this is really what happened. You know, they went into more depth that ties into some other stuff. And I've found a little bit more success with that when we're able to at least talk through that with the new candidates. So I'll plug that approach to, you know, taking some more time to say, hey, I get it. It doesn't seem like it was much, and in time you will understand that it's a little bit more, or it's a lot more, of course. I think there were other things I was going to comment, but that one really jumped out to me because it's something that I think there's a solution to, and I think that's just something everyone can kind of create their own version of what the first degree really covers.
Very cool. I should put out there something controversial because you guys are agreeing with me. That almost never happens. Let's see. I do have something controversial.
Actually,
we have lodges.
Randy,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
that is controversial unto itself. That you're not being I lost my.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was controversial that we were agreeing with them.
Yeah, no kidding. Agreeing with me is a dangerous place. So,
Hey,
go ahead.
I'm gonna do my usual thing, even though I've got the headphones in today. So hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear.
You are now.
So what I was gonna ask is, I mean, most of the people here know I'm pretty weird. Let's not mince our words. So I'm weird in the sense that I'm that millennial. I mean, clearly at the beginning of the chat, you know, Brother Joe said, the 90s, what a great time. And I said, yeah, it was a fantastic time to be born. So I feel like I am that guy where, yes, I love the esoteric. Those of you who have sat down and had esoteric conversations with me know I love that stuff. Those of you who have gone out with where we've kind of been socializing know I love that component to it too. You know, I'm not necessarily so big on the charitable component, but you know, I try to make my rounds and do what I can where I can. But how do we approach those types of people? The guys like me that kind of want to do it all.
I think we approach it from a authentic and transparent place. And if that is something that connects, then that is golden. And if it's not something that connects, then if we're smart enough to recognize that, we can help redirect that individual either, as we were just talking, to a different lodge that they're going to be more connected with, or maybe a different organization that is going to be more what they're looking for. Not doing them the disservice of giving them the degrees just so they can quit, but then also working with them to make them understand what we are and see if that does connect at a level. So I'm going to stop there and let other people talk.
Can I throw something out there?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Can I throw something out there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Build on that. one of the favorite organizations in masonry for me is the Shrine, and it's for nefarious purposes. One, because I'm kind of a lazy esoteric mason, and I'm a big believer in, you've got to have some tangible outcomes and do some good stuff, to actually help people. And I love that the Shrine is out there and a vetted organization. And so when I've got extra money and I'm a Shriner. I went through the ceremonial. I'm a lifetime Shriner, but I've never been to a Shrine meeting. I've been a Shriner for about 8 years, and I've never been to a single meeting. But I know if I give somebody money for a gun raffle ticket or a fish fry, I'm pretty sure that at least some of it's going for a good cause, and I can feel like, okay, I fulfilled some of my Rosicrucian duties of actually doing something for something charitable. And I also love it because when guys come into masonry that's kind of their thing, I can say, why don't you go get involved with the Shrine and go over there and play. And some of them have come back around, but I like that that's there. And that was kind of a footnote of what I wanted to say, though. A footnote up front. My goal for masonry is something that doesn't exist, and I think maybe at one time it did in the 1700s, but I would like to see craft lodges become more like an esoteric order, and where you dive deep and you have a regulated program of study. Maybe instead of you go from kind of a blend between tarot and tracing boards, and there's all sorts of applications of Kabbalah that I think it'd be great if that stuff were taught formally through the craft lodge. And possibly in my dream world, that craft lodge would feed right into the Scottish Rite, and it would be a good, like, observant Scottish Rite, but it practiced what it teaches. But I don't know, that's my pipe dream Masonic experience for retention, because I think that once you get deeply involved into those studies, whether they're more Eastern or Western, I think there's a lot of long-term retention and engagement that happens there, and I think it's enriching. I've seen esoteric orders that were kind of Masonic-like, and I've seen the other things, but I think it'd be cool to find or develop a Masonic, bring that stuff and make it pure masonry. The people that I've seen really appreciate that go and spend a lot of time. They become a Mason, and then they find an esoteric order, and they basically leave masonry. They keep paying their dues, but they go and they're like, hey, this is my thing. And then they learn for 6, 7, 8 years or more. And then they come back and they're like, holy crap, masonry is beautiful because I understand this. And I can sit in a crappy lodge and just, gain a lot just from watching the rituals and the experience. But, when they go to a really good lodge or a higher quality, where things are just done well, they're like blown away and amazed by what's there. But there's a huge gap. There's a huge knowledge and experience gap between that newly raised Master Mason who, goes through and learns all the catechism and returns it, goes from entered apprentice to Master Mason with a return catechism in a month, to that. And I think it's a shame that, I think it's more than a shame. I think it's and not even a tragedy. Well, tragedy is close to it, but I think that it's almost abusive of the craft that doesn't exist.
So, Brother Tim, there's always been
Then start it,
the
Tim. Do it. No,
there's
I'm
always
serious.
been
Do the thing, man. I think some of the purest, coolest, most mind-blowing, interesting things that have ever happened in masonry have come from people's discontent with their lodge experience, or they're happy with some aspects, but they're really yearning for something else, and they see the possibility of it. You've articulated it pretty well here, so I challenge you, man. Go out and make it.
Yeah, I think part of it, when it comes right down to it, is the contact. I'm getting real esoteric here, or really deep into something, but usually an order will have contact with something, or that you'll have masons that have that because they're part of something else, but you'd pretty much have to have I guess the phrase is fully contacted order. I don't know if that's
So what does your Grand Lodge allow? What's, if you can't do that as a lodge or an affinity lodge or an official body, then, find a like-minded brother, and it starts out as a coffee club, as a book club or something.
I've been through that, and don't think I'm not planning and working on this, but that's my pipe dream. Right now I'm just evangelizing.
very interesting. So the funny you should say that, because one of the things that I was going to bring up as a something to throw out there was, we talked about, we saw in the comments from Joe that he's a member of a several 100-year-old lodge and a relatively new lodge, 65-year-old lodge, and there's a difference between them. And I was going to throw out there, what do you guys think about getting away from the structured norm, still operating within Grand Lodge? Don't be going outside and doing weird stuff to get yourself in trouble, but call it a come together lodge, or an organic lodge, or an extemporaneous lodge, if you will. So that it may only come together for a few meetings. It may never actually stay, and maybe never planned on staying as a long-term lodge, but comes together short-term, specific focus, get that focus done, and then go back to your normal life. I'm throwing that out there as a
Like an affinity lodge that meets quarterly.
no. There's a set objective that you're saying, I want a lodge to come together because I want it to do this. And once we get to that objective, then we can see whether we want to even keep that lodge going, or split apart and come together for another lodge, another concept, another something that's out there, and then come back, right? So it's an organic lodge that is never meant to be something that's sitting there for 300 years, but comes and goes as people want.
Yeah, as one of the people in the room that had started a lodge, a friggin' effort to kind of open and close like that, and it's not. There's no incentive for Grand Lodges to make it any easier, to create lodges that will allow that and then shut them down. Now, California is probably the closest thing I'm familiar with doing that, but that's probably the only problem with that. The one thing that we bring up, is I have conversations every year. DDGM does his official visit, and he sits down and says, how you created this thing, and you want it to last until your kids or your grandkids can be a part of it, and you want to do that. And I said, honestly, I don't. Like, that's my understanding, and we won't go into this, but my perspective now is that making something last is a thing of an ego, is attached to an egoic structure. And so if it goes away, if next year our lodge decides, yep, we don't want to do this anymore, then you know what? I've got a lot of friends. We've done some really cool stuff. We've grown, and it's time to move on to the next thing, and all things are transitory, and you know, nothing is truly permanent. And so we shouldn't, my own perspective is we really should end the whole obsession with the idea of got to have a lodge that exists for hundreds of years, and that comes from someone who is a member of a lodge who's been around for hundreds of years. But that's, I don't think there's any value Masonically, you know, philosophically speaking. There's no value in that. And I think we should all get the more comfortable we are with this idea that staying power is really built on some egoic concept. I think at least from a growth, a spiritual progression, we veered off into some left field shit now, but a growth and spiritual kind of progress, that's something we should be working towards internalizing.
Yeah, some of the you guys can probably hear my dog. But I'll just throw these couple things out. Also, some things. One challenge I've met is finding other brothers that have the knowledge and the KSAs, knowledge, skills, and ability, but they have ties and obligations to esoteric orders, and so that limits some of the things that they will teach and share to certain degrees. And so it's a weird catch. That's one catch-22. But another idea that I've had, and this came from I ride motorcycles, and I went through an experience. And I've seen motorcycle Masonic stuff blend, and I don't like it. The only thing that I thought was a decent model was North Carolina. They say you can have a motorcycle affinity lodge and you can meet anywhere. Like they have requirements to meet quarterly, but they can hold a meeting outside on the road, pull over and park, and have open a lodge somewhere. And so I got to thinking, if a Grand Lodge is willing to let a motorcycle affinity group do that, have a motorcycle affinity lodge to say, hey, we're going to meet, once a month, and this is where we're going to meet, but it's going to be outdoors. I thought, you could almost use a motor. You could, you don't even have to have a building, and especially if you're wanting to do ritual at night or in the day, but outside, that'll not having a building to maintain alleviates a lot of stuff. And there's pros and cons to doing ritual indoor and outdoor, but usually Masonic ritual, I'll leave it at that. Masonic ritual I've done outdoors, especially at night, like a Master Mason's degree under fire, or actually entered apprentice's degrees outside under firelight are awesome. Pretty powerful stuff. Whether it's clear or raining, a little bit of rain is kind of cool with it. But yeah, that made me wonder if that would be a thing to try that.
Yeah. All right, guys, I got to bounce here. That's my time's up.
Brother Scott, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been an awesome conversation. I've taken more out of it than I think I've put into it. So I appreciate everyone's thoughts tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care, and much appreciated again. Bye.
Peace.